The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire broke out on March 25, 1911, in a building in New York City. This fire would be the starting spark that led to a nationwide reformation of labor laws and started the introduction to numerous safety regulations that would create a safer environment for workers to work in. The death toll of the fire reached a staggering number of 146 women and men who perished as the result of poor factory conditions and lack of safety precautions. The majority of the people who died in the fire were poor young women and girls who had immigrated to the country recently and were trying to make a better life for themselves. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was owned by Max Blank and Isaac Harris. The factory hired many immigrants to work and help in the production of the popular women's clothing item known as the shirtwaist. The shirtwaist was a shirt for a woman that was considered a practical working blouse that buttoned down the front and was modeled after menswear shirts. It could be worn tucked into the waist of a skirt and was valued for its simplicity. It could come in any color, and many companies began adding lace and collars to the shirtwaist in order to make theirs stand out. The shirtwaist industry was considered highly competitive because of how popular the blouse was, and because of this competitive business, the only workers at the building on the day of the fire were those who were working to make shirtwaists. The fire broke out on the 8th floor of the factory at around 4:45 p.m. when most of the workers were getting ready to stop for the day and head home. The reason for the fire breakout is still uncertain. However, investigators believe it may have been the result of a tossed match or a lit cigarette into a waste bin near 2 cans of oil that caught some of the garments on fire and resulted in the rapid spread of the flames throughout the closely cluttered factory floor. As the fire began to spread out of control on the 8th floor, many workers raced for the doors that would lead them to a safe exit down the stairs, only to find them locked. This led to the girls mobbing the elevator in an attempt to escape from the quickly spreading fire. As the girls from the 8th floor filled the elevator, the fire spread up to the 9th and 10th floors of the 10-story building. On the 10th floor, the workers found the doors to the stairs locked shut as well, and so they raced to the roof to try to escape the flames. Once on the roof, a professor from the New York University noticed the burning building and had his class of students find a ladder, which they then lowered down to help over 100 women and 20 men escape. Another building next to the fire was only 5 feet taller, and many were able to climb to safety up onto that roof without the help of others. While many of the workers on the 8th floor were able to escape through the elevator, and the 10th floor allowed access to the roof where escape was possible, the workers on the 9th floor did not have any way to escape. As they found the doors locked, they raced to the elevator, only to find that the elevators were not coming up to allow them to get out, because they were filling up as those below them on the 8th floor attempted to escape the flames. As the workers were stuck on the 9th floor, the flames began to be unbearable. Women and girls rushed to the windows and began to jump out of them to try and escape the painful flames that were beginning to engulf the entire floor. By the time the first girl jumped, the fire trucks hadn't even reached the building yet. The flames had spread quickly due to the large amounts of flammable material that were scattered throughout the factory. When the fire trucks arrived, bodies already covered the streets. As firemen began to try and reach the girls, it was quickly discovered that their ladders would only reach the 6th floor. As the fire took over the building, firemen and onlookers were completely helpless as they watched the girls and women jump from the 9th floor in order to escape being burned alive. Firemen attempted to catch some of the girls as they fell with nets. However, many of the nets broke and the girls hit the pavement anyways, leading to their death from the force of the impact. The full tragedy of the fire would not be realized until the fire had been put out and firemen and police were able to enter the building, where they began to find numerous bodies of workers who had been burned alive, many beyond recognition. 146 people perished because of the fire. In the days that followed, the public reacted in anger, demanding answers for who was to blame. Anonymous tips were sent into a committee which intended to use the stories as a way to help advocate for reforms of the building codes to prevent future fires, telling of fire traps that would lead to tragic deaths if a fire ever broke out in those buildings. One man told of a wooden staircase in a school building that would burn up in flames if it ever caught fire, preventing an exit from the 2nd floor for students to escape through. Many reported that there were no fire escapes in their building and that they had never been informed on what to do in the event of a fire. The committee also discovered that most workers had never participated in a fire drill with their company, leaving many completely in the dark on how to safely exit the building if it ever caught fire. As the investigation of the fire took place, many began to realize just how much of an effect the current building codes and safety measures had on the severity of the fire. Governor John A. Dix appointed a New York State factory committee to begin investigating different factory conditions all across New York and to come up with some recommended reforms. The committee sought to include mandating fire safety practices, regulating working conditions, improving sanitary facilities, encouraging collective bargaining, and limiting the hours of work for women and children. Commissioners began to call for reforms for the fire escape laws and stated that all high buildings should be equipped with outside escape ladders. One commissioner by the name of O'Keefe wanted factory owners to begin to look past just having a fireproof building, which had been the basic standard of the past, and to have more safety measures enacted. Even though the building may be fireproof, it did not guarantee the lack of loss of life in the event of a fire because of how the fire had the ability to spread throughout the building and because of the lack of escape options for those who may become trapped in the event of a fire. As the investigation continued to find fault in the lack of safety precautions that had been in place throughout the building, investigators also became concerned about the fact that the doors had been locked during working hours in order to keep employees inside and working. When the fire broke out, this led to a huge problem as workers attempted to flee the factory and found only locked doors. This forced a flood of people to attempt to use the elevators, which could only hold so many people, and eventually were unable to operate under the conditions that the fire presented. Factory owners Harris and Blanc were accused of manslaughter and arrested with bail set at $25,000 for their part in locking the workers into what ultimately became their death. They were eventually found not guilty in the deaths of their factory workers because of all the other things that had went wrong during the fire, and the blame for all the deaths could not be placed solely on the fact that the doors were locked. Fault was placed on the lack of building laws and safety codes that did not exist at the time of the fire. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire was a tragedy that ultimately led to a reformation movement against horrible working conditions and unsafe fire traps. It led to an inspection of hundreds of buildings and the conditions present across New York that had gone unidentified for years until the Triangle Factory fire occurred. The fire was a tragedy that took the lives of many young girls, women, and men who were all just trying to work and make money so that they could survive. The fire spread light on just how dangerous of an environment many people were working in, and it opened the eyes of the public who had witnessed the tragic event and led towards the desire to put value on life before profit.